Hello, 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 and welcome to this session of Learn Live. Today we are going to be talking about creating, configuring, and managing identities, which is an existing module on the Microsoft Learn site that you can go out and consume on your own. As you'll see on the screen, there is a URL for that module available out there now, so you can follow along if you would like to, although we do ask that you try not to use the labs or some of the other things, just so, that you have a chance to listen to some of the tips and the tricks. My name is Robert Stewart. I am with Microsoft, and I am a content developer that actually builds materials for the Learn system, as well as for our training and certification program. And let me give you a chance to also be introduced to Cecilia, who is our co-presenter today.
Hey, thank you, Robert. Yeah, my name is Cecilia Perez Benitoa. I also am a technical content developer for security, compliance, and identity. And I'm really thrilled to be here with everyone. So thanks for the opportunity, and thanks everybody for joining. It was exciting. I look forward to going through this content with you, Robert, and our audience, and having fun with the demos.
Cool. And we would be remiss if we did not say hello to Hassan. And thank you, Hassan, for joining us on the chat session to be the moderator today to help out answering any questions that you might have and post into the content. We look forward to actually seeing what content questions coming up and hearing how you like the materials that we've shared. So with that said, I will say again that this is on Learn. If you were to click on it, you would actually see something that looks exactly like this, and you will find that the content here actually is pretty darn close to what we will be covering in the slides. So again, if you wanted to follow along, you are able to do that. And please take the time to jump in and follow the session after the content is done. One thing that you will notice is this is one module within a larger identity-based learning path, that the entire learning path goes into more and more details about identities and how you can apply roles and use them. This is just one taste of creating and managing those identities within your Azure environment. And please take a moment to jump into the chat and say hi to each other. Let us know where you're from, and we'd love to have your involvement. Yay! I'm seeing all these pop-ups on my screen. It's so cool to see people from all over the place. Hello, hello, Oleg.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, there's Hassan. And with that, I will move over to our learning objectives today. As I mentioned earlier, this is a module about creating and managing identities. First of all, we'll start out with creating and configuring users. We will move then into hybrid identities, both for your users and for your devices. We will look at groups and how that you can take advantage of those. We'll talk about managing licenses, custom security attributes, and lastly, automatic provisioning, so that you'll with all of the pesky process of building your users once you get your environment up and running. With that, as with every great content and module on Learn, the first thing that you will always see in a Learn is an introduction that will have the same learning objectives that we just talked about, as well as expressing kind of what you have a chance to learn within this module. So we'll take a look at that, and with that, Cecilia.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, so, the last few years, I think, Robert, have really highlighted the value that comes from transitioning workloads to the cloud. But I think it's really also important to note that when we transition our workloads to the cloud, it's more than just about moving servers and websites and data, right? Organizations really need to consider the security of their cloud resources. And that starts with determining who or what can access those resources, determining the appropriate level of access, among other things, right? So there's a bunch of information that's associated with accessing resources. And that's where this concept of identities comes into play. But before we go too much further into the topic of how to create and configure and manage identities, I think it's really helpful to take a minute or two to explain what we mean by identities, right? An identity is the complete set of things that define or characterize someone or something. And keep in mind that identities are defined not just for users, but also devices and even applications, which is why I mentioned someone or something. Now, the easiest way to think about what an identity is really to think about it in our own personal context. We all have our own identities. For example, I have an identity as a Microsoft employee, right? And that identity includes information about how I can connect to the resources, the level of access I have to those resources, and again, a lot of other information. And those things actually can vary based on different factors, such as location. Am I working from a Microsoft office or am I working remotely? Like right now, I'm working from my home office. The type of resource that I'm accessing. Am I trying to access some confidential project file or am I just trying to access publicly available product information? All this information about what I can access, when, how, or all of these things are things that make up my work identity, as an example.
Yeah, and I always like to try to make this relevant and familiar with our real lives. All of us are used to having an identity and using one every single day. I guarantee you, if I would ask people to raise their hand, if you have a driver's license or a passport or a student ID or a Facebook account or Instagram account or YouTube account, all of those are different types of identities that you're used to. And with a driver's license, you're given permission to drive your car. With a passport, you're given permission to travel outside of your country and to come back into it. Some countries require special visa applications that you have to be able to travel or to get in and out of them, or potentially even inoculations that you have to get in and out of the country. So based off of that, it's a similar scenario with those user identities, those device identities, and other. As Cecilia said, you get that bandwidth of not just defining who you are, but what you are and other attributes that equate. But I also wanted you to make sure that you feel comfortable that we're used to all of these different types of identities that were already there for, and you'll see how that they align with what we talk about today.
Great. All right. So, there's a lot of information that's associated with a user's identity. And that's really where the role of the identity provider comes into play. Now, Azure Active Directory, which is part of Microsoft Entra, is Microsoft's cloud-based identity and access management service in Azure. In other words, Azure AD is an identity provider solution. And I really like this visual because I think it speaks well to the four pillars of an identity infrastructure. Now, identity spans the entire enterprise environment. So organizations need to think about it very broadly. Yeah. It's the collection of processes and technologies and policies for managing these identities, right? And so it's good to start with administration as one of the pillars, right? So what is administration? Well, I like to start with that because it's where we start the creation of the identities. We create, we manage, we govern identities under this pillar, right? There's the authentication pillar. It's about having sufficient proof that someone is who they say they are, right? It's that act of challenging someone for legitimate credentials. It's the authentication method for that identity. Then we
Cecilia,
also have,
can I interrupt you
please.
there? And I'm just curious, what are some of the methods that we might use to authenticate somebody? And are some methods better than other methods?
Absolutely. So the method that we're probably all most familiar with is a username and password, right? But there's so many more other ways and more secure ways of authenticating with passwordless authentication, for example. So you can use biometrics with Windows Hello, which uses biometrics, Authenticator app, FIDO security keys, and you can even use multiple factors of authentication. So there are definitely better ways to authenticate than just a username and password. And so those are things that organizations really need to consider as part of that identity, is how people will authenticate.
Cool.
And associated then with authentication, or related to that, is then the pillar of authorization, right? And the authorization pillar is about processing all that incoming identity information data to determine that level of access that an authenticated user or device has for the resource it wants to access. And we often think about authentication and authorization. Those are, we usually think about this as a combined pair almost. And then there's also auditing, right? Auditing is all about tracking who does what, when, where, and how. It's about having in-depth reporting. Am I going to get alerts? Also, governance applies in this pillar. So these four pillars together are really key functions supported by an identity provider. And we'll see some of these things as we go through the material on how to create, configure, and manage identities. But this is a really, I think, important slide.
Yeah, and just to from a personal standpoint, I like to also remind people that you can use information across all of these pillars to control different features and capabilities. We may not go into all of these in details in our demos and others, but if you have a user that is set up to only use a username and password, you can grant them one level of access where maybe they only have read-only visibility into your system, and then not until they upgrade to multi-factor authentication or Windows Hello or something else do they get deeper access into the tool. And I say that as kind of an introduction into our next slide, which is what we've seen as we've moved into the cloud and brought more and more resources into the cloud. Is kind of this evolution or change. Historically, identity was really used to grant you access to a corporate network. It got you through a firewall, and once you were on the inside of that, you had access to all of the resources. You may not have had security clearance to use a particular resource, but you could physically actually see it there on the network, which, if you think about it, if your account were to be compromised, that gives your, the users or the bad actor. I'm trying to make sure I use the right name there. The bad actor, the opportunity to have visibility and awareness of all of the resources. And once they know that there's a database out there or a file server or whatever, it gives them a lot more ability to hack and attack and go after that particular system. With identity, we are trying to move to a model where identity becomes a control plane of all of your material assets that you have within the cloud or on premises. Once you log in, every time that somebody tries to access a resource, over on the right-hand side over here, you check, you verify that that they have access to that resource and are allowed to use it. You can grant different levels. You can give them read access, write access, lots of different options that you can control in that particular scenario. So you are, trust but verify, each time that somebody comes to use that resource, which gives you a lot more control. If somebody now compromises an account, they just have at best the rights of that account, and they have to compromise something different to see or do more with that. So that identity becomes your control or your access plane for all of the resources that you have on the network.
And another expression I think that sometimes maybe people are familiar with is, in addition to that control plane expression, is identity is now the new security perimeter, right? So really cool stuff.
Cool. Yep, identity controls all of that, those items now, and it gives you, again, it puts you in the power control of where you want to go. So moving on, we next will actually get into the actual create, configure, and manage. I will be honest with you, the last 4 slides you saw, Cecilia and I decided to add to the presentation to set a context of why you would want to create a user, why you want to do some of the things that we're going to talk about in the rest of the session. So apologies that if you're following along, you won't see those last 4 slides. But if you do the entire learning path, you will have seen that other content. So we are now joining your regular scheduled module at this point with creating, configuring, and managing users. So every user, every resource, everything that you do within Azure needs some sort of user account created. You don't want to let any resource into your system have access without having some sort of an account. So start out with that concept in mind. There's really no generic account that can just do whatever they want. Every user should have its own identity. That way you can, as we saw earlier, audit, track, and administrate within it. So what types of accounts and identities are available for you within the system? You can get cloud identities. These are the default. You go in, you create new user, you create a bunch of users. Those are accounts that exist within your Azure Active Directory, and they can be worked with conditional access and be granted whatever rights and capabilities you want them to have. You can track and monitor them. The second type is a directory synchronized identity, which if just about everybody here probably has worked on premises, has an Active Directory set up in a Windows Server environment, and you hate to lose all of those accounts that you already have on premises. So what do? You can use Azure AD Connect to synchronize those into the cloud, and you now have a synchronized environment where your same users exist both on premises and in the cloud and can access the resources. That way you don't have to duplicate role users. We never really want to get in that scenario where we duplicated a user, because what if somebody leaves and you forget to delete one of them? You've now left a dangling resource out there for a bad actor to take advantage of. And then finally is guest users. You have scenarios where you might want to invite guests to come into your company to do specific actions. Maybe that's a vendor that's coming in to do some short-term work, or maybe you offer applications that customers or other businesses might want to be able to use. So that's the guest user account.
Yeah, and you know, Robert, I think it's helpful when we talk about directory synchronized identities, coming back to for a moment, is really to call out that that's really just, I think, a fancy term for a hybrid identity, right? Because when we think about hybrid, the reason we use that term is because most organizations today are still very much a mixture of that on-premise and cloud, right? And so as a user, I don't care about where a resource or an application is hosted. I just want to be able to access it regardless of where it's hosted, and to do so without having to enter different credentials, right? And if I'm an IT person, I want to make sure that can be done securely, right, for that on-premise user. So let's take a look at a scenario for a second, right? So on one side, I may have users that are configured as on-premise Active Directory. I may have Azure ID, which lives in the cloud and controls my access to the cloud-based workloads. But I want these on-premise users here, to be able to access those cloud-based workloads. And so we need a mechanism to basically bridge between the on-premise and the cloud. And that's where the solution came up. Microsoft has the Azure AD Connect. And through Azure AD Connect, we can bring these on-premise users into Azure AD seamlessly and securely and access those resources. And there are many different ways in which we can do that. All right. But the net of it is that now you are able to, through Azure AD Connect, bring in those Azure Active Directory users into the cloud and access those cloud resources. So it's a really nice thing.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that when they are changed on premises, it is a synchronization. It is not a one-time copy. So when you make changes on premises or make changes in the cloud, it is synchronized between the two scenarios, depending on how you have it configured. a demo is always much better than a
That's
picture,
right.
which we will get into that in just a moment. But we did want to actually pop up the screen since we were talking about users. We all have all users in there. You will see that you have several pieces of information like their name. You have information about where they came from. This particular person comes from Azure AD Connect. This particular and it, to move us forward, and I think Cecilia is going to take over. I think Cecilia is going to take over and doing a demo of this.
Yes, all right. So I lost the audio there for a second, Robert. I don't know, hope folks can hear me okay. So here I'm actually in Azure AD. And when it comes to Azure AD, as Robert mentioned, I can come into users. And by the way, I'm going to be using the, this is a classic view of Azure AD. So I'm going to come into users. And as you can see here, I'm going to select the classic view. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a new user. And as Robert mentioned in one of the earlier slides, we have cloud identities. We also have external users. So if I were to have selected invite user, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to keep as an internal user to my organization, but I could select this and that will allow me to basically invite an external guest user. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a username. I've accessed my handy dandy fictitious name finder, and I'm going to create a user called Caleb Foster, and that's the username. So now I'm going to come down here and give Caleb Foster, first name Caleb. We're going to create Foster as the last name. I'm going to do an auto-generated, not creating their password. And I'm going to leave it like that for now. But notice that I can create groups, or not create, but I can select if this Caleb is part of a group. I can give them a specific role. In this case, he's just going to be a user role. There's some other settings. But I'm going to leave this as is right now, and I'm going to go ahead and create the user.
And while that's creating, I will say that, or when you saw Cecilia put in a manual password, if she had chosen to let it auto create the password the first time the user signed in, they would be required to change it. In either case, you as the admin will have to make sure that password gets to your users.
That's right. So it created successfully. I refreshed my screen and you can see here that Caleb Foster has been created. Now I'm going to do something here. I'm going to now assign Caleb a license. I'm going to come in here. There's no license found. I didn't assign anything previously. And I'm going to go ahead and select Office 365. And here, by the way, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, you can select all the different services. I'm going to save. Let's see what happens. And, you know, it failed. And this is a really important thing to note. The reason that it failed, I'm going to exit out of here. I'm going to come back to my users. It's really important when you're creating a user that you have to select the usage location, because licensing, there are certain features and things that are not available based on different locations, perhaps. And so it's really important when you're creating a user that you actually define their usage location. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to select usage. I'm going to add Caleb here to Canada, and I'm going to save this. Okay, so that user profile was successfully saved. I'm going to close out of here. I'm going to go back to licenses. Now it may take a minute to do this. So let me just refresh, even though there's nothing there. I'm going to now go back. I'm going to select save here and see if that, there we go. And now it succeeded. So again, really important when you're creating a user, it's really important. And it's an easy thing to miss is the usage location. So that's on Azure AD. Now, do we have another exercise here, Robert?
Yeah, well, I can take over.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
With my, as Cecilia showed, she was using the Azure portal. So this is the Azure Active Directory that you were looking at. There is also Azure Active Directory is part of Intra, which comes with quite a few other tools like permissions management and verified IDs and other tools that you can use within your identity. But it also has the same type of functionality as the ability to create create users, to create groups and everything else. I'm not going to go through the entire process of creating a user, and I think Cecilia will be inviting a user in a moment. I just wanted to come over here and say that Cecilia was showing you the kind of the basic user creation process. There is also a newer process that lets you modify a lot of these different values on the fly. You'll also notice that instead of username, it now says user principal name. Remember, we talked about identities can exist for applications. Identities can exist for devices and other resources. So it's more than just a user. And so to keep it consistent across all of those types of systems, it's a principal name that you're winding up to create. In this case, since it's for a user, it's a user principal name. And that is the unique identifier for that account. And I also wanted to click over and say, here's where you enter in a lot of that other information. And taking advantage of this, you can do lots of extra manipulation with conditional access within your applications to use all of this data at a future point in time. And this is back to the usage location. I also wanted to show you that you don't just have to create a single user at a time. That's going to take you forever in thousands of persons companies. You can do bulk operations, and you can do bulk creates or bulk invites. What you will do is you'll click here, and it has a nice little template that you can download. I have already downloaded the template and started filling it out so that I can do a bulk upload. But you'll notice it has the same type of values here. Here's your username. Here's your user principal name. You can enter in your basic password. You can tell other information. And there's that key usage location field. One of my personal things that I always do when I add users, especially with bulk, I actually leave the usage location blank because that way the user, once they're created, doesn't actually specifically have access to get a license. I've set some conditional access rules up to always check that conditional access or usage location is actually set so that they can't create applications, launch applications, open databases, whatever. So it's just one of my little personal quirks on my personal Azure environment is to continue to rely on that usage location field in the future so that somebody can't randomly sneak a user in without that usage location and get advantage of my system. But if I were to save this file, which I am not going to do, I could just select it from CSV and it would create those users that I just told it in bulk within my environment so that I don't have to do a single user at a time. You can also do bulk deletes in that same screen. You could have a list of a large number of users that you want to remove, same Excel spreadsheet, and you just pull the large number of users out. Cecilia, I think you were going to show us an invited user.
A delete. We're going to go through
delete.
A delete.
Yeah.
A delete. No problem.
Sorry.
And by the way, I mean, I can show. So here, for example, I'll just call this out. So I added myself, and here you could see the user type as a guest. So let me just, before I do the delete, I can go ahead and do this. I'm not going to add it here, but you can actually then create the email or enter the email for that external user, their display name. And what will happen is when you say, invite, that person will get an email, and all they have to do is accept it. And then it will show up. That person will show up as a guest. As you can see here, I had done that previously. And the user type now shows up as guest. So yeah, very cool thing. And you could do that without any issue. Now, what I want to go ahead and do is I'm going to go back to Calib for a second. And as you can see here, I'm actually now going to delete this user. And there are a couple things to call out here. So when we delete the user's permission and access, this user is going to be basically in a holding state for 30. They're deleted from the system, but in a temporary mode, if you will. They're for 30 days, and they will not be permanently deleted until after 30 days. And that's really important. Now, when it comes to this suspended, and suspended is the word I was looking for, right? Once I delete them, they're going to stay in that suspended state for the 30 days before they become permanently deleted. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And by the way, the permissions to do this is actually you have to have a global admin or a user admin, or if you're a partner, a tier 1 or a 2-tier partner to delete a user. So Caleb has been deleted. I'm now going to, let me get out of here. I'm going to come to deleted users. Let me take a refresh. Oh, I showed up quickly. My connection is fast today. That's good. And you can see here, users are permanently deleted automatically after 30 days after they're deleted. So that's that suspended state I was talking about. Or I can actually delete them permanently at this point. So I'm not going to do that because I'm going to use this user later. I'm going to go ahead and restore this user. I'm going to restore. And he's been restored. I'm going to get out of here. It'll take a minute to refresh. But ultimately, there we go. I refreshed. He's gone. And if I go back to my users, I should see him back. There he is. So yeah, really cool thing. Again, suspended state. It stays, that user stays in that deleted suspended state for 30 days. After that, automatically and permanently deleted unless an admin goes in and intentionally permanently deletes them at that point. And again, you have to have global admin or user admin privileges or tier 1 or tier 2 partner support.
Yeah, and this is a great picture because your person, if they had left the company, maybe they find another position within your company within 30 days. You can give them back their full account and their history and that type of information. Or on the counter side of that, if you had a user account that was compromised for some reason and you need to do some sort of investigations, you can delete that user to get them out of active access of everything, but you can have that user still in the bank so that you can continue to do research and using Sentinel and other tools to be able to follow up with what's going on, even though you've kind of removed that account from active service. With that, I believe we are going back to my screen and the slide deck. So next section, everything dealing with a user at a time can just be a pain. You probably want to be able to work just like we talked about with bulk user creation within multiple users getting access or whatever at the same time. So that brings us to the concept of groups.
And yes, I love groups. I love groups. I love them because they're so convenient, right? Groups enable an admin to basically organize users based on, well, things that those users have in common. So it makes it so much easier to manage access to resources because now you can assign permissions at that group level versus having to do it individually, right? So just another way of doing things. And so with a group, you're basically able to define a security boundary, which is really nice. And now you can also assign groups, assign people to groups. You can define rules for membership into that. And we'll talk about that. That's called dynamic group membership. I'll talk about that in a subsequent slide. But there are basically two types of groups. You have a security group or a Microsoft 365 group. And a security group is really the most common type of group. And it's used to manage basically user or device access to shared resources. So for example, you may create a security group for a specific security policy, such as self-service password reset or conditional access policies to require MFAs. You can put all the people that you want to have that policy applied to in a group, and then you can more easily apply that policy to all the members of that group. Now, one thing to note about security groups is that they do require an Azure AD administrator role. So that's on security groups. The other group is the Microsoft 365 group. And this is often referred to and was previously, I think, even referred to in the UI as a distribution group. And it's really used for grouping users according to their collaboration needs, right? It's used for grouping users according to, hey, maybe they need to access a shared mailbox or a calendar or a SharePoint site. And because Microsoft 365 groups are really intended for collaboration, the default is to allow users to create Microsoft 365. So you don't necessarily need an administrator role for that. The other thing to note with both Microsoft 365 and security groups, you can actually add people outside your organization. So if you remember when we did the create user, we invited guests, or I showed myself as a guest, my personal account. So you can do that both with Microsoft 365 and security groups. And with both, you can also do the Azure AD Connect, group right back. So you can write both M365 and security groups to on-premises Active Directory, which is a great thing.
Yeah, and one other piece, or probably one of the most common questions I get asked on security groups in general is there really a technical difference between a Microsoft 365 group and a security group? Why do we have two? Since he had already talked about the M365 are really about collaboration, security groups are about us assigning access. The biggest difference, or the real difference between those security groups and the M365 groups is security groups can have very different member types or account types that get added into them. A security group can have users, just like we talked about, but it can also have devices and applications. So you can use information about the physical device that somebody is connecting with to be able to control what that user and account is doing. If a user is connecting to your network with a non-trusted device, you can look at that and say, well, I'll give them just this access or this capability. So the biggest difference between these, or the difference between them, is security group can contain multiple types of identities, whether that be a user identity, an application identity, a device identity, and others, where an M365 group is just users.
That's right. Cool.
And
so yeah,
excuse me.
No, let's see. So when it comes to groups, and we're going to actually see this in the tenant, which is the fun part when we can do this. But you basically can see in this image where you can see the group type or the membership type. So, and we're going to, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on this slide. Let's go to the next one, because we're going to actually see this in the tenant. The next slide is going to talk about a dynamic group, and I talked about this, right? It's really about dynamic membership, and I think what's really great about this is that you can actually define the rules to add members, and this is really convenient. And again, I'm going to show this. Both Microsoft 365 and security groups can use dynamic membership. The configuration rules for dynamic membership has an area where you can actually validate and test the rule that you create, which again, I'm going to show this. Now, you cannot use a group dynamic membership if the group is designated for assigned Azure AD roles, right? The option for dynamic membership disappears. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to show that in a moment when we actually get into that. But
which I think is just the next topic. So we'll let Cecilia, if you want to bring your screen back up.
Give me 1 second. I will come into this. We'll bring up the demo. And now we're actually going to show this. So I'm going to come back to my Azure AD. So I'm going to select groups here. And I'm going to actually create a new group. I'm going to start with an M365 group. Now, we mentioned earlier security groups are the most common. It's actually the option that shows up first, but I'm going to go ahead and create a Microsoft 365 group. I'm going to call this test one group. Hopefully I haven't used that name. Now, something to note here, which I think is very important, is because this is a collaboration group and it's intended for the purpose, or it's a Microsoft 365 group, which is intended for the purpose of collaboration, it includes an email address. And if you noticed, I typed the name, it used that same name for the email address, but I can actually change that. I'm not going to change that for now. There's a description. So this is Learn Live Demo. And so here is where you see the point that I mentioned. Azure AD roles can be assigned to this group. We're not going to do that, but just to make sure folks understand what this does is if I were to set this to yes, I can use this group basically to assign Azure AD roles. Now I'm going to just, I'm not going to create it that way, but the point I had mentioned earlier is as soon as I hit yes, the membership type here assigned is grayed out. And the reason it's assigned is because that is the only option you have. I cannot do dynamic membership with this option, and that's really for the purpose of security. So we're going to keep that to go. It's going to be assigned. I'm going to add myself, the system administrator, as the owner, and select myself. I'm going to do that, and now I'm going to add a few members. I'm going to add Amber Rodriguez. I'm going to add Caleb. I'm going to add Chris. I'm going to add Diego, and I think we're good there. I think we have 4 members there, and I'm going to go ahead and create this group.
Do you always have to add an owner to a group, Cecilia?
It's a good practice to do that, so I always do it.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is if you don't add an owner, then you have to have your global administrator or your a admin role specifically that's doing the work and manipulation in here. This lets you assign that larger ownership out. Right. And as an advertisement to other modules within Learn, while Cecilia's moving to the next step, is that we're not talking about Azure AD roles, which is one of the ways that you assign what authorization and what capabilities people have within this session, but some of the other modules in the learning path associated with this one go into depth about what those roles are and what you can do with them, and so you can see how the skills are going to build. Apologies for jumping in there, Cecilia.
No, that's a great point. And you can see here the test 1 group was created. Now I'm going to real quickly show a security group with I'm going to do this fairly quickly because I think this is really helpful to show. Test security group. Mm-hmm. Do this really quick. I'm going to. Group name is not available. That's.
You must have already made that one.
Yes, yeah. Live Learn group security. I make it long enough that it won't be used. There we go. Now here I'm going to do. And notice a couple things here. I'm going to do dynamic and. You can't have dynamic user and dynamic device both. You have to select one or the other. I'm going to select dynamic users. I'm going to add myself again as the owner. And this time now what we see is a add dynamic query. And I'm going to create a query here. And it's really easy because in this case, I want to create a query based on usage location. So I'm going to use the property usage location. I just immediately come up. I'm going to choose the operator equals. And I'm going to add, I want to create a security group for those users that are based out of Canada. Now I'm going to type in Canada there. And now I'm going to go ahead and use validate rules. And I want to add a couple users here that I happen to know are in usage location of Canada. One more, and Diego, which I know is not. So I'm going to do that. And immediately you see, hey, you know what? The status is X for this validate rules. So let's come in here real quickly. And the great thing about this feature is that it tells you what the issue is. I wrote in Canada because when I chose usage location, it showed up as Canada. But actually for the query, you need to do CA. So I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to fix this real quickly back in my configure rules. I'm going to put in CA. I'm going to validate the rules and boom, there we go. Those 3 users are in Canada and I happen to know that Diego is not. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And there we go. So that's a really nice feature about the dynamic membership and the validate rules, which I really love. So
yeah, and as Cecilia, you saw there, Cecilia chose to use usage location, which we've talked about quite a bit. You can use all of the other attributes that you saw associated with user. If you've set a job title of sales or a job title of engineering or a job title of executive, you can use that as a way of selecting who gets membership into those specific groups as well, so that you can quickly populate your group and maintain them just by creating a user and assigning the correct attributes versus having to always build out without having to manually add users. In this scenario, so say he's adding 4 users, that's not a big challenge, especially when we're only picking from 15 or 20. But if you're a company that's got 10,000 50,000, 100,000 employees, you're not going to want to manually add all of those users into a group. One other thing on the Dynamics rule engine, you saw that there was a little window as she was pasting in the rule queries, it put it in the text box down below. You can manually edit it right directly into that. So if you're a PowerShell guru or a CLI guru, you can just type your rule straight into that box versus having to use the little wizard to create it for you. So, and final apologies, you can do multiple levels. You can have somebody be somebody that's at a usage location in Canada and an engineer. So there are lots of capabilities. It's ambiguously broad in what you can actually do with those rules.
Cool. All right. So I think we've
Yep. Nope. We'll be back in. As you pop back over to my screen, and again, just as a quick visible, you saw that we get all of the same type of capabilities within the intra-platform. We saw that you can do devices. This is a security group. When I go to add members, you will also notice that it's not just usernames that are showing up in here, but I did want to show you that there are actual physical devices and other accounts that could potentially be added to this group if you wanted to be able to grant or secure access for an application. So again, you don't have to manually work with those items by default. With that, we will minimize, and that should take me back to the PowerPoint, and it does. And I apologize for this next piece in advance because it's a lot of talking versus actual showing it in the user interface. We went back and forth on setting up an Azure AD Connect system and managing devices. And when we did that, it was just going to get way too long, but all of this content, including a small lab, is available in the materials so that you can do some of this on your own to get the experience. But we did want to talk about the fact with managing devices, because this is not just users, it is devices and applications. You may want to be able to manage or drive your devices into your Azure Active Directory. So just like users, you have to add them as an identity within your identity provider, which is Azure Active Directory. And there's 3 types of device identities that are available to you within Azure AD that we're going to be talking about. And again, these can be shared with on-premises through. Let's talk about first an Azure AD registered device. These are pretty simple. There's a huge request started about 10 years ago, where everybody wanted to be able to use their phone or their personal laptop just to jump online for 2 minutes to check a quick piece of email. Set your out of office. You forgot to set your out of office before you went out on vacation and you wanted to jump on for 2 minutes to your network without having to, you left your work device at work. You didn't bring it on vacation with you. So what do? Well, we have the Azure AD registered devices. This lets you register a device in Azure AD, but a user can log in with their personal account and into that device, but they use their work account to actually connect into Azure AD, and that work account grants them access to do a specific work on a particular application, like setting their out of office information. So it's a great scenario to be able to bring that device in temporarily to particular work. Since it is now a registered device, you can apply rules to it. You can make sure that the user is not just using a username and password. Maybe you force them to use Windows Hello if you want them to be able to bring this device onto their network, or you can apply conditional access rules. We talked about the fact that maybe the user has the ability as a global admin, but if they're working from a Azure AD registered device, which is considered a personal device, you temporarily don't let them use their general capabilities. You can use conditional access to say, when you're logged into the system, you can change the rights that they have to do particular work. You can again force them to be patched and up to date and other information about this without directly taking over and controlling that device itself. So it gives you a lot of power with that personal bring your own device scenario.
And I see this all the time, Robert, because sometimes on my device, my cell phone, which is registered, I can't get in if I haven't done an update of my software because it's
Yep.
not compliant. So it ensures the high security. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. Which is always nice. And when you are finished with it, if you leave the company or whatever, you can just delete that, and your device goes back to normal. You're not having to worry about it. There's always a fear that your company can overwrite your device for security purposes or whatever. That is not the case. This is your device. They can't send a command down that deletes everything off of your device or any of those types of things. So again, this is bring your own device, be able to use resources that are associated or granted access to from your Azure Active Directory. The next scenario type of device is a Azure AD joined device. And that particular type of a device is one where you've got a corporate device. Somebody is given a physical corporate device that they own. That device they're logging into with their and based off of that fact, you might give it a little more trust within the system, and you can grant it maybe a higher level of access because you have full control as a corporate device of what goes on on that particular device, how it can be used. And again, you can do the same sort of conditional access work to control how it is being used. So the user is granted a physical device, they log in with their corporate accounts, and both to the device and to the Azure environment, and get access. This is kind of the scenario where you want to be. Generally, it was designed originally for cloud only, but of course we give you access to any resource, so it can be used for on-premises and hybrid type of scenarios that are set up. It is primarily a Windows 10, a Windows 11 feature, just like the previous Azure AD registered requires Windows 10, Windows 11, or a modern version of your OS on your mobile devices. That you want to use within those. So you get that full capability. Why would a company choose to set up in this scenario? Think about it in the concept of remote office, or after COVID, how many people are actually working from home all the time? You want to be able to give them a scenario that looks like they're physically on the corporate network, but while they're at home or at a remote office, this is the scenario that you would use. You're giving them those really closer to full capabilities because you have full control over the device, and you know that what goes onto it, you can actually manage and directly control all of that information. So it's a great scenario for remote offices that you don't need to set up a full corporate corporate account out there. You can just, not account, a full corporate network out there. You just give them access to the internet and they log into your corporate network remotely through this device. Anything you want to add on that one, Cecilia, before I switch to the third type?
No. Everything is clear. Okay.
Yeah, and the third type is considered a hybrid Azure AD joined device. Many companies, as Cecilia mentioned previously, have been dealing with Active Directory and on-premises, both users and devices connecting into their networks. And we don't want to set up a scenario where you have to then replicate those users, or in this case, those devices within the cloud manually and have two different versions of them having to log into their one account to use cloud resources and another account when they're going on premises. So we can use Azure AD Connect to synchronize your devices from that already exist on premises into your Azure Active Directory, and therefore get the full benefits of your existing systems already available within your cloud environment just by setting up Azure AD Connect with the users. So this also has some other benefits in the fact that it gives you a much broader range of operating systems. Azure or Active Directory, not Azure Active Directory, Active Directory device management actually gives you access to Windows 8X, 7X, and Windows Server and others that are not specifically available device software versions or operating system versions that you can use. Again, you can set up specific policies using group policy configuration manager or Windows Intune if you're a cloud-based company, to tell it exactly what the configuration has to look like to be able to access. You enable conditional access capabilities as well, so that the control can be. Sorry, I keep hearing that my audio breaks up every once in a while. I apologize for that. Hopefully, that's only happening with our host and not with the actual live feed. But so you get to use all of those features of the device as it's been entered in. And again, we're not going to be demoing this particular feature, but we wanted to make sure that you understood that a device is a person too. And therefore you get that access, all of that to your device, and you can do them in tangent. This user, this device can do this job. So using them all together gives you a lot of that identity as a control plane that we talked about earlier, as a way of managing all of these particular pieces. The last thing that I'm going to talk about here is you probably want a scenario if you've got your devices on premises and you've used Azure AD Sync or AD Connect to move them into the cloud. Is that a one-time process? It does not have to be. You can set up what is known as device write back, so that if somebody gets a new corporate device that they come in and register into the cloud directly through Intune or whatever, that device can be written into the on-premises Active Directory. It goes into registered devices. If you're an Active Directory guru, you'll know what that means. Therefore, now has all the permissions. This includes password changes and other information associated with that particular device that can all be transferred through device write back, so that you're not having to deal with a one-time scenario. You do have to enable it. By default, device write back isn't going to be turned on immediately. It's something you have to choose to apply to your particular systems if it's something that you want to use.
Well, and one thing I'll call out, and I think you mentioned it earlier on, Robert, is that all three of these trust types, right? Hybrid, registered, joint, all three of them are available also through conditional access policies. So you can select any one of those trust types when you're creating additional conditional access policies, which ensures that security even for the hybrid scenario or the BYOD scenario. Not just
good call out.
Yeah.
Good call out. So we saw briefly So say you added a license to a given user earlier to grant them access to Office. We want to go into more detail about how you can grant and use licensing within Azure with your users to give them more and more capabilities. So that with that, I will turn it over to Cecilia to talk about managing licenses.
Yes, and again, we're going to spend some time in the tenant, but before we do that, let's just kind of cover a little bit about licensing, right? And so pretty much any Microsoft paid cloud service, that includes Microsoft 365, Enterprise Mobility Security, Dynamics, and other similar products, basically require licenses. And these are assigned to each user who needs access to those services. In an earlier demo, as Robert mentioned, we added a user. I showed how we can assign a license to that individual user. But the reality is, as Robert mentioned, managing an organization and doing this per user is quite cumbersome. And so that's where Azure AD now includes group-based licensing. So you can assign one or more product licenses to a group so that any member that joins that group is now assigned that license, the license that's associated to that group. And if a user leaves that group, then the license is removed from that user. Now, group licensing does require, group-based licensing does require the Azure AD Premium P1 or higher, or any of the licenses that you see there on the screen. And also, you need to keep in mind, right, for any groups assigned a license, you need to have a license for each individual member of that group, right? If not, then you're going to have a problem. And we're actually going to demonstrate that in the demo. And a couple things about some of the features about this. So licenses can be assigned to both security and Microsoft 365 groups using Azure AD. Now, I do want to call out that if you create a Microsoft 365 group through the M365 admin portal, you don't always see the option for assigning licenses. And the reason for that is that there's a parameter called security enabled, which is typically turned off in the Microsoft 365 admin portal, but is on by default with Azure AD. That's easily addressed through PowerShell command. It's something I just wanted to call out if folks encounter that. And then also when a product license is assigned to a group, the admin can disable individual services, which is so you have control, fine-grained control over that. And so any cloud service that requires user licensing is actually supported through this group-based licensing feature. A couple of things to note, and this is an important one, is that group licensing is currently available really only through the Azure portal. Now, group licensing is a smart feature, right? I mentioned a second ago that if you have more users than you have licenses, you're not going to be able to assign it. But at the same time, and when I say it's smart is if a user is assigned a license from multiple sources, the license isn't going to be consumed multiple times. The license is going to be consumed only once. So that's built-in intelligence there. It's a smart feature. And then lastly, something I want to call out is there may be scenarios where licenses cannot be assigned to some users in the group. And this may be because A, there's not enough licenses, as already mentioned, or there may be an issue with that feature or a service that's part of that feature is not available to a given location, country. And so there are different scenarios where that may happen. And in that case, it'll show up as a violation that needs to be addressed.
Cool. So just a quick question, Cecilia. You're telling me that if I started out my company granting every user a license and then later decided to move to group-based licensing, I'm not doubling up my licenses? Right. It's smart and recognizes that?
That's right. That's right. It's
cool.
Smart in a lot of ways. And we're going to show that because even if it tells you, hey, you know what, you got too many users here, it's not going to try to assign users licenses when you don't have that number of licenses. So it's a smart feature. It's really cool stuff.
Okay.
It's demo time, I think, right?
It is.
All right. Let me bring up my tenant. All right. So let me see. So now let me go into, actually, I'm in the groups. Actually, you know what? Before we go into groups, I'm going to come back and I want to first show one of my licenses. Here we go. I just wanted to show here licenses. I'm going to show all products just to basically show what I have. So I have here all my different licenses. I have two F3 licenses. So I just wanted to make sure folks could see what we have in terms of licenses. I'm going to go back to my other screen. Let me go back to my groups. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select Let's see. I'm going to select this test one group. I think, yeah, I'm going to go to my licenses. I'm going to assign a license. I'm going to assign that F3 license. Let's see, and save that. Actually, you know what? I think this was my, yeah, you know what? This was, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry.
So you
I actually,
successfully assigned the
yeah,
license to your test one group, and it did work.
yeah,
Now
yes,
every user that's a member of that group has that particular license associated with it, and if she were
that's
to go back to
right.
licenses,
Actually,
you'll see they're
I
taken
wanted to
up.
do something. Yes, but in this case, I think this is my, let me go back to my group here, because this group was my, oh no, that was the right group. I thought I had done it mistakenly to the security group, which was, do I have four members? Yeah, and so let's see here. You should see, yes, this is what I wanted to show. We have an error, right? Because keep in mind that when I created this group, I created four members in this group, but I only had two F3 licenses, right? So it's telling me, you know what? I have these guys. This one actually has a conflicting service plan because this has an E5 license, and this gentleman actually also has a conflicting license. So it's actually going to tell me where I have issues. So I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go back to, actually, that was Caleb. I'm going to get rid of these guys. I'm going to remove these.
So you're taking them out of the group.
I'm taking them out of the group right now.
Yep.
And that worked. So that should refresh. And this should resolve. I'm going to refresh this. I think that should refresh my license issue. It might take a little bit of time to reprocess if I did this right. But basically, if I did this right, if I did this right,
Do a demo, lose a sale.
that's
This
right.
is it does take a few seconds on
Yeah,
the back end for the group membership and the licensing to be validated. So you may, when you clear your
yeah,
errors out, you may
yeah.
see that it takes a
Licenses.
moment or two before the
That's
change
right.
and the report actually pops up.
That's right. That's right. But basically, when there's a violation, you're going to be notified there's a violation, and then you have to either remove the users, add more licenses, or take corrective action in that case. So yeah,
Yeah.
that is
The nice thing about it is it only, or the users, if you had two licenses and four users, the first two users still get their license and can continue to operate while you're waiting. It doesn't just block it across the entire group because
right.
of that licensing issue. When you assign more licenses, they automatically get applied. You don't have to come back into that group and reassign licenses. So the work is all happening on the fly while you're doing this. Is not something that you have to say, oh my gosh, I got to go back and remember that was test group one and doing the particular work in that
Right.
scenario. Yep.
That's right. Now, another thing I want to show here, and we spoke about this briefly. I'm going to go into my administrator account, which is, and I'm
Yep.
going to show my licenses here because we talked about the fact that you can actually remove individual services within a license. And I'm actually going to show that. So I'm going to come in here to my E5. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, let me do this. I'm going to come into, do I have this open? I don't. I'm going to come in here for a second to just 1 second because I want to make sure that you all can see. And I just come in here for convenience. And I'm using my account for convenience, so I don't have to log out and log in as a separate user. But if you can see here, I'm logged in as, again, the administrator account. You can see that here because it says MA. That's me. That's my mod administrator account. And Planner is showing up here. Now, I'm going to go in, and if I can find where my licensing is here, I'm going to select me. I'm going to come into licenses, back to my E5. And I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to remove Planner. Right, so I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to save this. Right, it's successfully updated. Again, this may take a minute or so. I'm going to come back to users. on there. Let me see if this is still open here. I'm going to refresh this screen. Come back to my little hamburger icon. And you can see right away that Planner is gone. I'm going to select apps here, and you can see under the P's that Planner is no longer there. So the great thing about this is, and this is true for individual, if you do it at a individual user level, at a group-based licensing level, you can actually remove individual services from specific licenses and roll those out maybe over time, but you have that great flexibility when it comes to group-based licensing. So
Yeah.
a nice capability there.
Yeah.
And is there anything else? Do we want to show anything else there?
Nope. I think that's the majority of it, and we can always come back if we
Cool.
remembered that we forgot to say something. So back to the PowerPoint deck. We're going to talk about custom security attributes.
I love this. I love
Yeah,
that feature.
this is a cool feature. So everything that we've shown you so far with attributes were those built-in user attributes that come within that came, but we had usage location, we have role, we have locate, and others. So what do you do if something custom? If you want to create a capability that or an attribute that you can use to do some. Cecilia, it sounds like my audio is breaking up.
I can hear you now. You were breaking
Hello?
up there for a second. I can hear you okay.
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 If not, I'll jump in. And
sorry, I don't know why my audio would break up. I'm at Corporate Network. Okay, yeah. So you may need to create a custom attribute for the usage. So we've added the capability of creating custom security attributes within Azure Active Directory. You can come in here and make any attribute that you want. Maybe you want to set up a scenario where you know whether an employee ever works on a weekend. So you could create a custom attribute that talks about work schedule, and you mark set up employees that are weekdays, and you can weekends. And that way, if you've got a user that never works on weekends and shouldn't have access, it gives you an extra attribute that you can either restrict access if you feel like doing that, or you could just track, use that as a capability within auditing. These attributes can be assigned to users, they can be assigned to devices, they can be assigned to applications, and all of the different types of identities that and objects that we have talked about so far, so that you can get yourself some very fine-grained and extra capabilities in conditional access, in other tools beyond what is just built into the system. These are key value pairs, meaning that you give it a title and a value. Those values can come in, and I'm going to go ahead and skip past the slide to the next one, which has got a little bit more detail about it. But these values can be any sort of key value pairs. You can use a binary value, so weekend, yes or no, or you can use information about an hourly worker. You can put in worker type, and they can be salaried, they can be hourly, they can be temp, and other types of scenarios that you can set up here. Then you use those for filtering, for auditing purposes, and again, even in conditional access, to help you define exactly what users, what devices, what applications you want to control specific access to. This is technically considered a preview feature, although it will be changing in a very short amount of time. I can't promise any particular date, so I won't even try, but I do know that it is supposed to be moving out of preview in the near future. But it's great to be able to define these attributes across. You can define them across your entire tenant, so they're visible everywhere. They're not just in Azure AD. And let's see, is there anything else that, not specifically, a demo is what really is going to sell. these features and these capabilities. So we'll switch down to the exercise, and Cecilia is going to take over and give us an example um, of the
Yes.
of a custom security attribute.
Let me bring up my screen. There we go. All right. Yeah, I love this feature. And I'll be honest with you, I struggled at first to understand it, but as I started playing with it, I really got into it. There's some pretty cool stuff here. Now, before I start with the actual feature, I'm going to go into roles and administrators because this is really important. Permissions. You have to have permissions to access this feature. Even though I am set as global admin, I still need to have permissions. Now, I've already given myself those permissions, but I'm going to go ahead here and type in security attribute, and we're going to see 4 permissions show up. And there are assignment administrator, assignment reader, and definition administrator and definition reader. And these are important, right? I have assigned myself both the assignment administrator and definition administrator role for this. So I've already done that. But this is important because it also gives you the opportunity to separate roles, right? So you may have someone that is assigned an assignment administrator or definition administrator, I'm sorry, to create the attribute sets. And I'm going to show you that. And then you may want to have someone else have the assignment administrator. So something to consider, but even as administrator, global administrator, you do not have these permissions by default. So really important to go in there and do that. Now, so let me come back here to, now I'm going to come into the custom security attributes. And as Robert, you mentioned, this is still in preview. So I'm going to come in here. I've already created a couple attribute sets. Now, a couple things I want to mention here, and this is important as well. I've created the cybersecurity application attribute set and a user set. Now, when you create a set, it's important that you go through and plan what you want to do, because once you create an attribute set, you can delete it. And you can see here, I made that as I was creating this in preparation for the demo, I created an attribute set, and I thought I was creating an attribute for that set, and it turned out to be I was doing it for the attribute set. So I've actually did that in error. So just keep that in mind. Plan when you're doing this, what you want to do, because once you have a set there, you are not able to delete it at this point. And if I go just to the ellipsis, it basically just lets me edit that. I'm going to go into the application one. Again, I've already defined this. I'm going to go into the sign-in frequency. I'm going to hit the ellipsis. And here you can actually deactivate an attribute or edit. I'm going to go ahead and edit this. But a couple of things I want to call out. Actually, I have a typo there, so I'm going to fix that. I can edit. That's a good thing. And in this case, I can have multiple values to be assigned. I don't want that for this option. I've created predefined values, and those predefined values in this case are 1 day, 2 day, because I'm going to actually use this for sign-in frequency. And so I'm going to go ahead and say that because I fixed the typo. So I've already done this. And this is the attributes now within that attribute set. You were going to say something, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, you've chosen, and we mentioned earlier that you can predefine the particular values. You can actually set it up to where somebody can manually add their own values, or you don't set up a list of predefined items here. Those can be used. Remember that these are physical attributes. They're available for apps for your users that can be read through APIs like the Graph API, or can be called through PowerShell. You may want the capability for somebody to put in personalized information about themselves that you're not going to use for conditional access while Cecilia is moving around to other. You want to start keying up your next, the next phase of this. You can use these attributes as to store some personal information about your particular users if you want them to be able to, again, put in data about these that can be displayed and used later, or potentially within applications or others. So these don't always have to be technical, deep information that you're using to run your entire environment. That's what they're originally designed for, but you do have some flexibility there.
That's right. And now one of the things, as Robert also mentioned, is once you create that attribute set and the attributes within that set, and you have a lot of flexibility there, how do you want to use this, right? In this case, what I'm doing is I'm going to assign an attribute to an application. And I actually created here, added this application. And I did this prior, just in the interest of time, right? And I could see here under, and this is true for any of the applications that you create into Azure AD, the custom security attributes preview. And you can see now here my attribute set, the information around the attribute name, sign-in frequency, and I actually have assigned the 7-day value here. I could have selected any one of these. And the reason I'm doing this is because what I want to do now is I want to use this with conditional access. So I'm going to now come back to, sorry, I'm getting, let's go back to, I'm going to go into security here, and I'm going to select conditional access. And I actually have a policy already created. And this policy that I created is actually one that is, oh, I have a typo there, to require 7-day sign-in frequency. All right, so I'm going to come in here. And what I've done is I gave it my name, specific users. I have all users, and I've excluded my directory roles, admins, etc. So I can do that. But what I really wanted to show here is, at this point, is the information around select cloud apps or actions, because this is where you come in now and you actually can do through edit filter. Let me come in here. This is where I actually now have selected, I configured, and I selected the attribute that I want. And what this is going to do is anytime this policy will actually trigger based on this attribute that I've had. So any application that has this attribute set of 7 days will trigger the policy. Now you may be wondering, well, gee, I can do this through session controls, and you can. But if you imagine that you're an enterprise that has hundreds or even thousands of applications, it's a lot easier potentially to create, when you're creating or adding that application in Azure AD, just to add the attribute at this point. So now you can create the policy and have that policy trigger off of the attribute set that you've created, which is the intent of what I did here. Right.
And so, if you've ever scrolled through and tried to select apps or users out of that selection screen, selecting 1 or 2 out of 25 is not hard. But when you get up to 100, 150, it takes forever to do select. So to be able to filter those and use that as your selection criteria helps speed things up a ton. And then you probably, and then as Cecilia is going to talk about the session now, you can show how it's applied.
That's right. So now with a session, it's set up to 7 days. So it's the policy is triggering off of my attribute, and the session will now require it to be, okay, you have to have signed in every 7 days. And so it's a really nice capability because it lets you have conditional access policies based on custom attributes that you define.
Yeah, cool. And again, this is these can be applied to users, to apps, to devices, anything that's got an identity associated with it. So it gives you that capability to just specify one extra level of information to go through. We are back to my slide deck to talk about our last item. And again, like managed devices, we don't have an SAP environment to be able to show you how you can do automatic user creation, but we will talk about that capability. Everything we've done so far has been a manual process of creating users, where you went into users or groups and you could, whether you did one at a time or bulk to get multiple done, you have to do that. However, there's always the scenario, there's 2 scenarios that we want to be able to account for with this automatic user creation. How many people have hired somebody and had to wait 15 days for that data to get out of the hiring department to IT, have an account created, and then that gets to a manager? That's a lot of extra processes. The other scenario is, what about when somebody is released from the company how long does it take from the time that somebody is released before, again, that note gets to IT and it gets out to remove particular users. So we have within Azure User Provisioning adopted the industry standard that is SCIM, System for Cross-Domain Identity Management. That allows you to actually link your Azure AD up to your we call it a human capital management system, but your HR systems, to be able to send a record that will automatically create a new user, put in the basic information based off of your capital management system, username, first name, last name, job title, all of that type of stuff, so that you don't always have to manually do this. It's not a requirement that you use these systems, but it is a opportunity for you if you're in an organization that has a capital management system that you want to be able to use that to manage your users. And these are becoming more and more popular. These are the different components. You have your HR system, you have your provisioning service, you have Azure Active Directory, and then again, the protocol is system for cross-domain identity management lets you do that automatic user provisioning and generation within your system so that you can speed up that process so that as soon as they're added to your HR database, they're available. We are now down to our knowledge check, and we have about 7 minutes left or 6 minutes left. So we will move across pretty quickly. I believe that our host is going to put a little link into the window that you can click on to allow us to see the different questions that are available, and we will let you first answer. So Azure Active Directory, we talked about this very early on, has 3 types of identities. One of those is a cloud identity. The other one is a guest identity. What's the third type of identity available to you?
Ding, 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 ding. I can't sing the.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You always want to do the. And Laurent says he's having. Our host is saying he's having some sort of challenge bringing these up, which is fine. We can talk through these. So as you have probably already guessed, it is a directory synchronized identity as Cecilia called out earlier. These are also called hybrid identities. It's where you've got an on-premise identity that has been set up, and you're able to synchronize it so you don't have to duplicate your identity across both services. You can just synchronize them across it. Azure AD Group, second question, Azure AD Group's licensing makes large-scale management easier. Typically, how soon are licenses and modifications effective after you assign them to a group?
That's right. Is it A? Is it B? Or within 24 hours?
Yep. And again, we'll go ahead and move forward with this particular piece. We say within minutes. It is not necessarily instantaneous because it does take some processing on the back end, and the larger your corporation is, the larger the number of licenses that you're assigning. It may take a slightly larger amount of time. And the last question, Azure AD allows you the definition of 2 different types of groups, a security group and to manage members' computer access, shared resources. What's the other type of group? And we did try to trick you on this one.
That's right. That's right.
The answer, of course, is M365 groups. You may also have heard of them called distribution groups historically. That is why we put that in there. Yes, we were intentionally trying to trick you in that particular scenario. With that, we are reaching the end of our session. These are the wonderful topics that we talked to you about today. And again, this is part of the existing module that is Create Configure. It is one component out of 6 in a larger learning path that goes into a lot more details around even getting much more into that authorization side of things. And with that, I will say we are ready to bring things to a close. Please feel free to rewatch this or other videos within the series that have all been covered. And thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you,
it's been
Cecilia.
great. Thank you,
Thanks,
Robert. This has
Hassan,
been
for
fun.
answering
Right.
all the questions. I am sure that you've done an amazing job. Thank you. Bye.
And I really encourage folks use the subscriptions, play with these in your environment. It's a great learning. It's a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.